We don't want to do anything to everything of a family that said, we have come to closure. We have removed our loved one, we have buried our loved one, or interned them in according to their family traditions, and we don't want to do anything to open that wound. Can we understand their concerns? You bet we can. We all serve in the military. We have friends that serve in the military. No one understands that better than we do.
How many, or even roughly ballpark, how many have been retired at sea since 2008? How many remain?
We've had 14. We've had 14 instances of retirement at sea. I can't give you the exact number that's gone into that right now. I can get you that number right afterwards.
State for the record where the incinerated remains ended up, and did the Air Force know that's where they were ending up?
I think when Air Force leadership discovered, the mortuary leadership at Dover discovered where the final disposition was, they took action immediately.
So they didn't know anything until 2008. That stuff was just being turned over to the contractor, and they didn't have the slightest idea where it was going.
I can't say what every person in the Air Force knew. I can say when the leadership of the Air Force, the leadership of the mortuary at Dover, identified this process and said, we can do better at this. They took steps to improve the process to better serve and better honor the families.
And they could do better. Was the disposition in landfills deemed to be disrespectful?
It is certainly not the way we would have done it, looking back. That's why in 2008, when we saw that practice, we changed that practice. Yes, sir. Sorry.
174 instances that our colleague exposed this morning is a greater number than had been discussed before. Did the Air Force know of this number and it didn't come out, or is your education part of this repertorial process as well?
Not all. When we were asked the questions the first time, it took us a while to gather the information to get the right number so we would be giving an accurate number. It wasn't that we knew the number, we were trying to make sure we had the accurate number, because certainly we want to be forthright and accurate in giving the information. And it took a significant amount of effort to get that number and to make sure that number was correct. Yes, sir.
So, Kevin Barron with the National Journal. If the Air Force leadership found out about this in 2008, knew it was a wrong thing, instituted all these studies, made these changes, why did the public not hear about it also in 2008? Why has it taken 3 years now, and like the Craig's reporting, to get this out to the open?
As I said, the families had told the Air Force that they did not want to be notified if any subsequent portions of their remains were identified. In keeping with the family's wishes, we did not go back to the family and identify them, because they have closure. To open up that wound would be cruel.
To protect the families, nobody would.
That's why we didn't go back to the families in 2008, and we haven't today, because these families have told us they have made the tough decision. It is not an easy decision to when somebody comes to you and says, what do you want us to do if we identify any subsequent portions of your loved one? Once they struggle with that and they make that very tough decision, we want to honor that decision.
But I think his question is why was their decision not to come forward? Why didn't the Air Force think this is a matter of public interest, and then to say, we're in 2011, 3 years later, to say, oh well, we knew at the time it was wrong.
We believe the process was being carried out prior to 2008 in accordance with industry standards. Yes, ma'am.
But you just said that you knew what the industry standards were beforehand. So if they were being followed out according to industry standards, then you knew before 2008 what was happening with the leftover incinerated remains, right?
That's a fine question. In 2008, when the new leadership of the mortuary was examining their procedures internally, they said, you know what, we can come up with a better process than this. And they developed a much better process that they have today.
But earlier you said that it's industry standard that if there were any other leftover remains, that it would be mixed with medical waste or put into a landfill. So if that was the industry standard and you knew it was operating to industry standard, then
Why did you change?
You would have known before 2008.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm following where you're trying to go with the question.
I have another question then.
Okay.
What did the Air Air Force tell the families would happen with the leftover remains if there were unidentified remains later?
They told the families they would be appropriately, they would have appropriate disposition. Yes, ma'am.
Understanding they told us that there's always a form in the military. And what was the language when it said, when they signed this consent or whatever the term is, not to be notified about additional remains? What was the language?
There is a form. I don't have a copy of the form or the exact language here, but we can get you a copy of the form. Yes, sir.
So some families opted to receive remains.
Yes, sir.
So when we're talking about these two, and in that case, they would be presented to the families, and the families would be responsible for taking care of them according to their traditions.
Yes, sir. We would every time we would go back to the family and return the remains to them.
And these 274 families said no.
So we do not want to be notified at all.
That has not changed because of this, I guess, revelation.
No one's come. None of those 274 families, I think, what you're asking, have come forward and asked us that they want to change their, that they now want to be notified. They want to be told. If they do, we will certainly be forthright. We will tell them everything we know about the dispositions of their loved one. There were 9 calls that started a week ago. Since this most recent discussion, there's been 1 additional call.
So 10 total.
So there's 10 families who have said, I was unaware that this was...
No.
Okay, what do they say?
We stood up, a few weeks ago, we stood up a 24-hour hotline for people who had concerns about operations of Dover Mortuary based on accounts in the press of the overarching issue. Just recently, when the most recent issue came to light, there has since that time been 1 additional phone call to the hotline. It was answered today very quickly, and we don't have any follow-up that was required from that phone call. I didn't take the call, so I can't tell you the exact details of it.
I mean, are these people who are calling people who signed the form and...
The hotline is open to anybody who calls. The calls have mainly been from family members whose loved one came through Dover, and they had a question about, when they came through Dover, what happened with their family members, and